Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Diary of a CIO, the podcast ran by Fruition Consulting. My name is Sarah Pawson, and I am CEO of the Fruition Group. Really delighted to welcome our guest this morning, Norma Edwin. Welcome, Norma.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, brilliant. So, very quick intro to Norma. Norma is an award-winning technology executive, and she started her career at Shell and has operated as a CEO, CDO for organisations such as Thames Water, National Grid, and Places for People. Norma is also an NED for HSB Bank PLC and the EV charging company PodPoint. So busy career, Norma.
Yes, and the learning. I love to learn. It's all about learning and sort of the next thing and just continuously sort of keeping up with things and getting your brain in gear.
Yeah, excellent. And outside of work, Norma has 2 children and enjoys cooking, gardening, rowing, and Lego to zone out and pass your time.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Brilliant. So we always kind of start with the same question on this podcast. So when did you know that you wanted to be a CIO, and what was the biggest risk you had to take to get there?
Right. Well, and funny if this question came up on one of our WhatsApp groups, and was it design or chance? And from my perspective, getting into technology was by chance, but actually it was by someone else's design. Stephen, I think he was the HR, sort of my HR person when I applied to Shell and went through the assessment centre. And actually, when I applied to Shell, I selected that I wanted to work in brand management and marketing. And that was what I really wanted to do for Shell. And he saw something else in me and they stuck me in the IT department. And so I was a bit sort of kind of confused at first, thinking, gosh, I don't think I had never expressed a desire to work in IT, and nothing on my CV said that technology. But actually what they were looking for then were people who could understand the business, understand the strategy and the outcomes they were looking for, and then be that bridge and that translator between, building those partnerships between the technology teams and the solutions they were building and the business. And that was about 20 something years ago, and I absolutely loved it. And so I did that for about 2 years, sort of running a small team, delivering solutions to the business, and I ran my own P&L. And that was quite important because after you're running your own P&L, you had to successfully build those partnerships and make sure that the solutions that you delivered were going to add value and what they wanted. And so I did that for 2 years, and then I decided that to do my job better, that I really needed to understand about technology. So I took the risk. Yeah, it was a risk, having never done that before. And I jumped ship and I went to learn how to code, how to build solutions, going down to the master control room, building stacks, plugging in things, and, building racks and building servers, and sort of worked as a consultant, pretty technical, coding and building stuff for quite some time. But then as you grow, you get bigger projects and you get bigger programs, but always understanding how things work. I guess that's just the way I always thought. I need to understand the why. How do things actually work, and how do they do that to then better summarize up the solutions and marry that with the strategy. So that's really how I got into technology, having just done an MBA at Imperial College. So new to me, and I've absolutely loved it ever since then, but very commercial and very business focused about how we get the value out of technology. And then through doing that and being sort of very data driven, so my core really is in data. And I realized that that's the one thing that people really care about. They care about what data can do for them, about the analytics and the insights to be able to drive actions. And so I went further down to see, well, why is it that actually what we expect out the other end from this the technology sausage machine, we never really have the right data that we want and at the right time. And so I started working my way down the stack and into sort of how we managed our data, how we governed it, and how the front line who were keying the data into the systems, what they thought and how to understand, or get them to understand, that actually they were really, really important in how we got insights up all the way through the top of the organization. And that's really what I did at BAT, was their sort of data transformation. And then I realized, having done that for 8 or 9 years, that I could be a CIO, because it's all about the data, and then how you get the whole engine room behind it, which is, information technology and all your applications. How do you get them to run and seamlessly and talk to each other in order to deliver that data out at the other end? So that's really how I got into it. And then the design about that, I knew I could be a CIO just to be able to deliver that and get that alignment across the organization.
And did you strive to progress and kind of get to that kind of senior executive level position? Was that something in your kind of mindset that you were ambitious to get there, or did it kind of happen more through being successful at the roles that you were doing?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I was overtly ambitious at the beginning, and that I was fortunate, that I was just good at what I did, and always, delivery focused. I've got delivery coursing through my veins. And then you realize that when you deliver, you attract sponsors. And so I got some really good sponsors. So then I got bigger programs and bigger projects, and you're learning all the way, and you're making mistakes and you're failing. But then, I realized my ability to manage scale and to manage risk and to manage ambiguity. And it wasn't, a bit of a late developer. It wasn't until about sort of 7 years ago or 8 years ago, then I started to really drive for ambition, that I wanted to be, a senior executive that was part of the decision making, and that had the influence to change the way that we worked, and really bring the technology conversation to the boardroom about how technology really is a value creator, and it's not a cost center. And we don't want to just be barked orders at and stuck in the basement without any windows.
Yeah.
And I need to be able to have my voice heard and be able to influence that. I needed to sort of have a more senior role. Yeah.
You mentioned having some sponsors throughout your career, and obviously the HR person, was it Stephen, who
Yeah.
obviously had a big impact on your career right at the early stages. Is there anybody that stands out for you, that's influenced your career to date, and how?
I joined BAT in 2008, and that was really the sort of just under 9 years that I spent there. I was looking at my university. That's really where I, grew up. I learned to navigate complex organizations, the power of sort of networking and partnerships. And I had 2 great sponsors there. One was Mark Burns, who actually gave me the job in the first place in 2008, who also saw something in me. And, in those days, he gave the job to the best person. So that was great. And throughout my career at BAT, he was a great mentor, a great friend, and he really sponsored my development by giving me opportunities. I think what we all really want, and probably women in particular, is to have the opportunity or have the chance to be able to do that bigger role and to be able to progress. And then through that, I got another sponsor, Chris Clemo, who probably gave me the biggest job of my career at BAT, which was the global head of data for their big enterprise transformation program. And that really was a game changer for me in terms of what I learnt, and about resilience and about delivery and really working as a team. So I had 2 really great sponsors at BAT. Now, obviously, there are lots of other people along the way who helped me, and especially the team that I had was awesome. And but it was great. I think sponsorship is quite important, and you can have it anywhere along your career, because invariably your first sponsor is probably your budget holder. They don't necessarily have to be a senior exec, but at the end of the day, people want success and they want delivery, and therefore sponsorship tends to attract people, or you're attracted to sponsors who, if you can demonstrate the trust and that you will deliver and you can be relied upon. So, are you credible in what you say? And then do you do what you said you were going to do? And then the most important thing is, do you constantly communicate? So they're not just wondering, I asked Norma to do that, what's happening? And they sort of have to chase you. It's that constant communication. And I think that builds up trust.
Yeah, obviously that's great that you've had those sponsors and those mentors that have influenced your career. how do you see that role of kind of mentor mentee evolving in, I guess, today, operating as you do at the level that you operate at? Who mentors you now? How does that work? Or is it lonely at the top? Is it kind of like this is when you have to dig deep into your own resources to kind of be focused?
Yeah. It's always very lonely at the top, especially when you're operating in an organization. And so I look at sort of as mentors, and then there's coaches and sponsors, and then there's also your sort of ops team. And so I have a selection of friends who are probably part of my ops team, no more than 4 people who I talk to and I bounce ideas off, or who pick me up when I'm feeling down or when I made a mistake, and who are the champions in your corner and who really encourage you. So when when you are faced with a challenge at work, or looking for a new role, and you look at the job spec and you think, oh God, I can't do that. Your ops team are the people who champion you and say, yes, you can, or perhaps it's not for you. They basically give you honest feedback. So I have a selection of a few good friends who keep me honest, keep me level, and also, help and encourage me to keep going. And I would give a tip about people's ops team. They shouldn't be members of your family. Your family invariably will do that anyway, but also they know you very well, and therefore their expectations of you are slightly different, and they may be slightly limiting and slightly risk averse, because they don't want you to fail, because they love you and they want to try and protect you. And so they're not always the best people in your ops team, and irrespective whether you ask them their opinion or not, they're going to give it to you. So you can save that for a family ops team, but your ops team really need to be people, and not necessarily in the same industry. Actually, they're better if they're not in the same industry, because then they have a different perspective on the challenge you're facing or what you're thinking about.
That's great advice. And I guess when you get to operating at your level, you've got to do that. And are they people that you've worked with previously? How have you kind of developed those relationships and partnerships?
Interestingly enough, I've not worked with any of them.
Oh, right.
They're people that I've met through networking or through introductions to from other friends. So it's purely just coincidental, and then there's a spark, and also they've got a lot of patience, to sort of be part of my ops team. I don't actually know if they're formally part of my ops team, but they're certainly always there. And then I have a couple of other people who I meet regularly, every quarter, as the diary allows, who are much more sort of either mentors, or they're really sort of sage and wise, and they have a really good perspective on things, bring a lot of clarity to the way that I want to think about something, or I want to express an opinion. Tell stories, or they ask you questions, and then through their stories and through their questions, you sort of get down to the real nub of it, the purpose about why am I doing this, or why should I be doing this, or why shouldn't I be doing it. So there's a whole sort of mixture of people, I think, have certainly supported me and helped me, and I like to pay that forward. And so I mentor a few people, and I'm happy to go through the whys and then the risks and the downsides of doing things with other people. So I'd encourage everybody just to have a broad but not many selection of people from different backgrounds who can just give you that perspective.
Yeah, that's brilliant advice. And it's interesting because the more people that I speak to at your level, one of the areas that they struggle in, and quite often this is male C-level candidates or C-level executives, is building that network of allies and ambassadors and supporters for their careers personally, because it's almost been neglected. It's hard when you're busy, right? And this is a demanding role, but you've got to invest that time into, like you said, your personal ops board is so important to have and create. And I think people suddenly, maybe more so than ever in the last 18 months, when economic conditions have been tough and challenging, and people have found themselves in difficult situations career-wise, that they've realized they haven't invested that time and the importance of doing that. So
that is so true. And I think I was there at some point, and I think COVID probably heightened our loneliness about. So when you're in the office, you're seeing people, and you have those sort of coffees or impromptu coffees, or as they call it, water cooler moments. So you're in touch with people regularly when you see them. But during lockdown, when you were sitting at home, you didn't have those interactions, and I think the loneliness was sort of perpetuated. And you're right, it's a full-time job. Most events are either breakfast or in the evening, and after you've had a full-on day, the last thing you want to do is walk into a room full of people that you don't know and have to sort of dig deep to sort of make conversation and sort of be interesting. And there's always that feeling when you walk into the room that everybody else seems to be chatting and having a good time, and you're sort of standing there on your own. But what I have learned is that everybody feels the same way, and so you just got to bite the bullet. Everybody's really uncomfortable walking to the room. Everybody really wants to make a friend and be interesting. And so if you look at it like that they're feeling the same way that I'm feeling. You said it mainly men has sort of felt that way about sort of not investing in their network. I think that women probably suffer more from that we don't give ourselves permission to actually invest in ourselves. We do a lot of things for other people, and we do a lot of things for the community. But when it comes to sort of investing in ourselves and almost sort of having fun, we sort of rein ourselves back and think, oh no, we can't do that. We can't do that. I've got to be very purposeful, and I've got to be doing all these things. And I debated about this and how we change that. I think that shows that when you go to a lot of events, that there are very, very few women in the room. The other day I went to an event at a small round table, and of the sort of 30, I'm going to say about 35 to 40 people in the room, only 3 of us were women. And now there's an element of, having to go home or childcare and your sort of, family life circumstances. There is an element of that. But I think that we don't give ourselves permission to say, I'm having the night off. I'm either going to ring my mother or tell my husband or partner or whoever, or the neighbor, you're staying at home, cooking my kids dinner, and I'm going to invest in myself. I know that I, feel that I need to be cooking, cleaning, and doing everything because as a mother for my children, when actually, I'm getting better at saying, actually, you know what? You can either fend for yourselves or say to my husband, Adrian, you're coming home and you're going to do it. But that's quite a difficult, we need to get over that barrier, I think.
No, I mean, I can totally relate to that as a female leader and parent of that guilt that's ever present. You've got to park it sometimes and put it in a little box and allow yourself to focus on you. It's so important. That leads on to my next question. You kind of answered it, but I guess it'd be good to talk through that. Any role, juggling work and home is challenging, but it's kind of C-level, it's a demanding role, and there's a certain expectation around time and presence. How do you balance professional and personal life when you're in the throes of a big job?
Yeah, sometimes I will admit not very well, but I think I'm a bit of a workaholic, which I inherited from my father. And I think it's just recognizing and time boxing things. So I think in any new role, and a lot of time, well, my roles all have been about sort of digital transformation. So transformations are very, very hard. And I do always say that, the first year and, first year to 14 months are going to be really difficult and really brutal, because you've really got to put the investment in and lay down the foundations, get your vision, get your strategy, and get the team aligned. So you are working quite long hours. And I do say that if after 14 months I'm still working these hours, then I haven't been successful in empowering the team and getting everybody else to start to own and drive it. So that's one thing. So it's about time boxing things and recognizing that it can be quite tough at the beginning. And then also just kind of forgiving yourself to say that, I am going to be the best mother I can be and the best, partner I can be. And, just I say that only my children will ever be able to judge me about whether I was a good mother or not, but there's lots of other pressures coming on from, how can you be working those hours? What about your poor children? So that's fine. That's just, my choice. But it is hard. So what I do find myself doing is that, we have, quality time or time that's locked off. So every evening, irrespective, we always have dinner together as a family, and we always play a game. After dinner, we always play a game, whether it's cards, frustrations, Scrabble, double. We always play a family game, which gets quite competitive. And then after that, the kids are now at the age where they're 11 and 15, 16. So they want to go off and do their own thing. But we have that time together as a family. And then invariably, they don't want to talk to us anyway now. And they go off and do their own thing. And then when they go off and do that, I will then jump online until it's their bedtime, put them to bed. And then depending on what's on TV, jump back online again. So I'm probably not the best example, but I would say that you just need to carve out some time where you're present. And that's something that I have been working on and listening to a lot of podcasts, that it's no point sort of, playing with your kids, but you're constantly thinking about that email that you need to write. You just got to switch it off and say, I'm going to play whatever game it is for the next hour. Until one of us gets bored or whatever, and then I'm going to do the email, and then but if you sort of just working through that, saying I'm giving myself time to do the email, allows me then to be present and really working hard on being present, and then going back and doing that. But I've already got a question, but that would be my question to the next person. How do you balance that time, and how do you give yourself permission to do that?
It sounds like some acceptance, knowing that first 14 months of any new job at that level is going to be incredibly demanding. And that's the time that, perhaps work has to be a priority over home, because let's face it, sometimes work has to be a priority over home. It doesn't mean you don't love your children.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just life. And that's life lessons that people, I guess, our children need to learn. But equally that time boxing and being strict with yourself. I love the dinner and the game every night. It just focuses everybody on having, that little bit of interaction, even if it's 20, 30 minutes or whatever. So
and it's quite good fun. But you've actually nailed it and put it much more succinctly than I did. It is about the acceptance. It is about the acceptance that you can't be all things to everybody all the time, and not to beat yourself up about it when you drop the ball. I mean, my kids often, we will get to school and everybody else is dressed up in pink or blue, or it's some kind of, no uniform day. And there are my kids who are not wearing pink or blue and are in their school uniform. I said, well, that's just tough. You'll just suck it up for that day, But so you do drop the ball and just say, and accepting that you will drop ball.
You've lived and worked in Europe, Scandinavia, Asia, Africa. You've got a real kind of international background. How do you think that's helped shape your career, or has that helped with leading teams? Has it given you a different perspective?
I think so, massively. Because we sort of grew up, you said, living in lots of different countries, and my parents were very particular about embracing the culture, and I guess being included, and willingly wanting to be included. So we always learnt the language, and we always ate the local food, and not just on special occasions. My mother would learn to cook, wherever we were living. She'd learn to cook the local food, so it's part of our way we grew up. So my father particularly believed, to get to know people really well, you do that through food and through language, hence why I'm a foodie. I've always had that perspective that people are pretty much the same all over the world, and they have different sort of perspectives and different views and different cultures, which are very rich, which they bring to the table. And so when I look at teams, I look at people and build teams, it's just about what diversity, what different angle they can bring to the table, and what you can learn from them. So I think that it has sort of broadened my perspective, but it's not something I even think about. I just naturally think about diverse teams, multicultural teams, and people who think differently, to be able to sort of bring something different to the table.
You mentioned that you've worked in lots of diverse teams. How have you, I guess, adapted your approach to have to create that diverse team, given your background? You said it's just come naturally to you, but if you've got to create a team, how have you done that to make sure diversity is present?
I think it's either the way that you recruit, or well, it is the way that you recruit, and it is the roles that people hold. And obviously this, at the core of it is always your values,
Yeah.
and that you're looking for a cultural fit. So, I look for people really who are curious, who want to learn, and, who have, an ambition. It's not to be a big ambition. You want to invest time in them because they're like a sponge. And I would take on somebody who demonstrated those qualities rather than necessarily the technical skills.
Right.
Because that's because they add value, they add something to the team, they want to contribute, they're curious, they're always questioning, sort of challenging, and that then drives conversations, it drives innovations, and it drives a different way of being. And so, faced with two candidates, I would go for that diversity in thought, which is the most important thing, not necessarily in the way that you look or your creed or color, but really it's what you bring to the table, because you have a different view, you have a different background, a different upbringing, and therefore you're bound to look at things in a different way. In the same way that, diversity and women on boards, as we all know, they just bring a different perspective. So other people will as well. So that's quite important. And then I've also been quite fortunate that that in working for Shell and working for for BAT, where I sort of, between the two of them, sort of spent 17 years, they are very global, diverse companies. So within both those companies, we had a sort of a mini United Nations anyway. So then, what I'd learned personally growing up, I was then able to sort of put language to or structure around in a workplace that, isn't it great that we're all from different places, and then understand what it really meant in the workplace as opposed to just in the playground when I played with these kids who, you just play games.
Your career spanned 17 years at Shell and BAT. Which is a
few sort of things in between.
A few things, a long tenure. CIOs, sorry, and I guess C-level people within technology, the average tenure has shortened quite a lot over the last probably 5 to 10 years. And we typically see a CEO stay in a role for perhaps 2 to 3 years, which is probably reflective of your more recent career. Why do you think that is?
I think, well, my circumstances were slightly different. So I'll just talk about sort of what I think about in general is a very sort of short-term view, technology, and to do transformations and to really build up the foundations, the infrastructure, because technology at its core is all about infrastructure. That does take time. And I think that there is often an unrealistic view from the board and the exec about the amount of time it does take to really build solid foundations. When we can build things very quickly, but they won't last, they're not sustainable, and they don't allow the ability to change and keep pace with the business. And so I think there's a short-term view, because really technology is a long-term view. It takes 3 to 4 years to actually build the foundations, build the capability, the talent within the team, and actually create that alignment. And I think the alignment is really important with the business strategy so that you're adding value. And I think the second thing is that traditionally, the role of the CIOs, we haven't really helped ourselves in the language that we use, and we tend to talk in very technical terms. And so, obviously, generalizing and making a parody of it is that after 2.5 years, if you keep talking in technical language about fixing the firewall and the infrastructure, and whether you're on AWS or Google, and whether you have SAP or whatever, the board don't understand that language, and after a while they just get bored. They get bored of the lack of progress because they just can't see it and they don't understand it. So I think there are two things. It's the short-term factor, and also I don't think we've helped ourselves in the language that we've used, and not aligning everything that we do, and everything that we do within technology needs to be aligned to a strategic objective, and you need to be able to measure that and to a valuable outcome. So, you're building the infrastructure to be able to innovate, and you're moving to the cloud to be able to innovate and change at pace. I'm upgrading the firewall because I'm minimizing our risk, because it's about cybersecurity. So everything that we do and the language that we should use should talk to risk. It should talk to revenue, growth, and productivity, but we don't. We talk in bits and bytes, and therefore it just goes over people's heads. And after a while, I think, it's been 3 years, X million pounds later, and I don't see the benefit of it. And therefore things become a bit tricky. That would be sort of my view. Yeah. So when I look for roles, and I'm looking for a new role now, I'm looking for a CEO who, and an executive team that are really bold, and they have a really ambitious vision, but they have the appetite to actually do it, and they understand that we're in here for the long term. Sure, there's short-term deliverables and there's short-term value we can add, and there's medium-term value, but really the holy grail and the sustainability comes from actually having that long-term view and being patient and allowing the technology and assets, and they could be other physical assets, to be built up in a way that is sustainable.
Yeah. That's really good advice for any sort of aspiring CIO, or probably an existing CIO that's maybe having some of those challenges about how to, I guess, perhaps manage upwards and kind of manage that relationship with the board. What are the kind of key attributes that you think every CIO needs to have alongside what you've just shared? Because that was really valuable.
Oh, definitely the role is shifting now to be the attributes you need to have are commerciality, being really commercial and being business focused. So I look at myself as a CIO that sits as part of the executive team. My first and foremost role and job is to work with my peer execs and the CEO about the strategy and driving the company forward. So what is it that we are going to do as an executive team who hold that accountability to drive this company forward and get that absolute alignment that this is what we've all agreed on, these are our headline goals, and then that's what I participate in, what I discuss about, and I bring value to that conversation. It just so happens that I run technology, and it just so happens the CFO runs finance, or the marketeer runs marketing. But first and foremost, I think that we need to be inclusive, and we need to be commercial and very business focused. Our voice shouldn't only be heard when it comes to just talking about technology. We should be across the whole of the business. You don't have to understand it very well, but you need to have an opinion, and you need to have a voice about what we're doing as a company. And then the other key thing is driving ruthless prioritization. We cannot do it all. And that's where the conversation, where your voice has to be heard at the table, that we have so many things we need to do, but we really need to focus on the critical 4 things and no more than 5, as opposed to the 150 to 250 programs of work that we've got running, which are really important, but they don't shift the dial. And that's where you really got to be part of that conversation, driving what those priorities are being. And then I always use the analogy of the puzzle. Then you pick up your piece of the puzzle from the table, and then you say, right, this is my piece, which is about technology, but I know where it fits in with the rest of the organization, with the rest of my peers. And I keep checking in, every week or every month with my peers to make sure that our pieces of puzzles are still aligned, and that we're still all on the same page, and we're all focused on the same outcomes. So I think that it's less about your brilliant knowledge in every new technology coming on the market. And that's where your empowering your teams comes in, because you have brilliant people in your teams who are rising up through the ranks, who are young, dynamic, and know all about that technology. Your job is to lead them from the direction from the top, and keep them aligned, and keep them collaborating and talking with the rest of the organization. So I think there's a definite shift from being super technical. I think certainly when I was almost growing up through the ranks, the CIOs and the leaders were really, really technical, and which doesn't make for good business partners. And how to drive that growth forward in the company.
Yeah. And how does someone that's new to the role of CIO, CTO, or is kind of that level below and ready to take that next step up, how do they develop those skills to think broader and to that ruthless prioritization and that commerciality might not be something they've been exposed to previously? How do they get that experience or learn those skills?
Simon Sinek has a great book on why, and think about the purpose. So why am I doing this, and what is the purpose? And I had an old Professor Rainbow from university, he used to say to me when I used to write my essay, he said, Norma, if you can't define the purpose in 20 words or less, then you don't know what you're talking about, and you're not crystallize your arguments, your thought. So I would challenge everybody to sort of, whatever it is you're doing, think about the purpose and try and get it down really, really succinctly. And that's quite a difficult exercise to do. Sometimes it can take me half a day to really crystallize things down, to say, what is the purpose and what is the value that I'm trying to do this? And then, your next question is, who is the customer? What is the outcome? And do I know the customer, which could be a colleague, could be a stakeholder, it could be the person sitting next to you in your team who needs an output from you. Do I really know who they are and what they want? That, whatever it is that I'm going to do is going to add value to them and going to deliver what they want. So I think you break it down and, and simplify things into the way you think. And there are lots of, podcasts and books out there that you can read just to help you get into that mindset. And don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to ask for questions. And this is where your ops team comes into place. They will help you shape that why, and you can throw things out there or work with your team within the office.
And it sounds like those sponsors and allies that we talked about earlier, particularly within an organization, the two people that you mentioned at BAT were, I guess, critical to your personal development. So you've got to be in the right organization as well, haven't you, to develop you? Not every business is going to help you develop personally into that role, and I guess remembering that.
So that's good. But then back to, I think, everybody's favorite topic, we're back to culture again. And so and we do have choices, and I know that if not, you people just can't pick up and leave. But certainly if you're interviewing or you're looking for a new role, or the influence you have within an organization, that culture is very important. That do they value you, and do they value the diversity you bring or the inputs that you bring, and do they care about my development and my growth? And as you rightly say, not all organizations do that, but then we're all different. There are lots of people who thrive in organizations where they only want to be an individual contributor. They don't really want anybody's help. They just want to do it themselves, and they're allowed to go forward. And others, we're more team players who want to have that collaborative help and support, and you move together as a team. So we're all different. So but I do think that the culture and the organization that you want to work in is quite important to get the best out of you. So it's taken me a few different departments, teams and organizations to land on where I really thrive. And sometimes you get it terribly wrong, and you think, okay, well, and that in itself is an experience. I can say, well, I know I definitely don't want to be doing that or working in that kind of environment. And that in itself is a decision that helps you shape things forward. So that it's not all going to be roses, but every experience is a great experience.
Great advice. And what you said earlier about the broadening of your experience across the business, and not just being very knowledgeable about technology, is great. But ultimately, as CIO, CDO, CTO, you are the most senior person within that business from a tech perspective. And as an individual, how do you make sure your knowledge is current, and that you're able to keep on top of innovation and trends, and artificial intelligence and data are obviously very hot topics right now. As an individual, how do you do that?
I sort of read quite a bit, but it doesn't have to be extensive reading. So I get sort of the daily McKinsey, snapshot. A lot of them are sort of 7-8 minute reads, which you can then go on to read a bit further. Chosen sort of industry events, and then at work I rely on my team and also third-party vendors. So often, in from a team perspective, be really curious, and I'll just go sit next to somebody. What are you doing? Sometimes, it might not be the best experience for them having me sit next to them. So it's okay. I actually just, I'm just curious. I just want to understand, how does that vector database work? We didn't have them in my day. So, how does that actually work? And so, there are different methods, but it's just about the curiosity again, just sort of understanding how things work. And also I find that when I write strategies or board papers in particular, once again writing them in English and writing them in that sort of language that the board understand, I like to be sure in my knowledge deep down of the bits and bytes that as I summarize it up, I'm summarizing it up accurately, and that I know what I'm talking about. I hate to be on wobbly foundations when I've just got the summary and the blah blah blah. If I don't understand, how that's actually working deep down, then I just don't feel credible. So so then again, you're curious to find out to a certain level of detail how it works, and also just because it's interesting a lot of the time, the new technologies that are coming out, and learning how AI works, how we can actually implement it, and where it's going to add value. But I think your team are probably the best source, and I think it's also proud and interesting for them to know that as a CIO you're actually interested in what they're doing. That's the flip side of doing that, although at the time it might seem a bit scary when your boss sort of plonks himself next to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's a really good way of making people feel valued and empowered in the team, that they've contributed to something that the CIO needs. Like you said, it might be scary at the time, but when someone reflects, it's never as bad as it perhaps seems. No. In your opinion, Norma, today, 2024, we've got 12 months ahead of us. What are the top 3 priorities for a CIO with what current innovations and technology?
It's about some of the things are foundational, but they lead up to sort of the bigger conversations. So I think it's about talent. You need to have the capability and the capacity within your team. And I think that data is really powerful. Data has always been there. But to scale AI and Gen AI, they consume an awful lot of data. And so you need to have a good element of your data governed and in the right place in order for Gen AI and the AI tools to consume that. And then the most important thing about that is about security. And then finally, alignment. How do we build those strong partnerships across the organization so that we are focused on the right priorities, and then we can ruthlessly prioritize the things that don't need to be done today or don't matter today, and to do that. So I would just summarize, I'd say it's talent, data, and alignment across the organization.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I think quite often that foundational element can be forgotten. Ultimately, we haven't got the right people in place, or the right people that we can develop to have those skills to support AI or data or the actual alignment and implementation. It's never going to work. And is that sometimes quite easily forgotten, that there's we assume we've got the right people?
It is, or conversations in the boardroom as they are today with AI and Gen AI overtake that. Everybody wants Gen AI and everybody wants AI. We've had AI for a long time, and machine learning and algorithms, but obviously Gen AI has taken it to a new level and it's now much more accessible. When I was at Shell, the people who sort of did that kind of work, who were what we now call data scientists, who built all the sort of the algorithms and the machine learning stuff. I mean, they were statisticians and mathematicians and highly skilled, and nobody understood what they did. But now we can all almost all have a go. So it's much so, which makes the talent pool easier. But the pressure then from above is that, why can't I have this now? But I don't have the talent now, and the talent's in such huge demand, and it's unaffordable for many companies. So it's just balancing that off, and therefore, once again, your role as CIO and your language in the boardroom is how you manage those expectations. That I do need to build an element of the foundations, and one of the most important things is I need people. I need to invest in people. I need to build that talent. Not today, but I'm on the right trajectory to give it to you. But things don't happen overnight, right?
That's probably a great line that any leader should learn. Not today, but I'm on the trajectory to get there. As opposed to what are we doing? How are we doing it? So and
also the plan. So here's the plan of how I'm going to do it. And actually, what's really important about that is you can track my progress. And you can be involved, right? You're not just sitting there watching me. You can actually be involved.
Excellent. And final question for you today, Norma. I've loved chatting to you. We always ask the previous guest to leave a question, and this question came from Andy Burton, who is the CTO at eSure, and he asked, "Can you tell me about a mistake?" He actually said big mistake, but we'll soften it to mistake. A mistake that you've made in your career and what you've learned from it.
Well, I was to say which one to choose from, but I must probably say that the one that has shaped me the most and what I learned from the most was probably early on in my days at Shell. I'd moved over to start to learn to build solutions and so I was sort of, one of the team who were building things, and I was on a project, and I was so excited that I just sort of kind of went ahead and built it and was really excited, and then sort of presented it to the client, and to our moment, no engagement, no partnership. They looked at it and just said, that's not what we want. And then that sort of moment where you're up here thinking, I'm really going to wow them, I'm really going to show them what amazing work I've done, and then the room is just silent, and everybody says, but that wasn't what I wanted. And so it was so what I learned from that is about the conversation and the collaboration, and just talking and listening about what are you trying to do, what are your challenges, what is it that your role is, and what's your outcome, and then sort of working totally in partnership and in collaboration, because I can build the best solution, but if I don't bring people on board and it's not what they want, I wasted 3.5 months or sometimes years doing that. So what I learned is that whole partnership, doing it, co-creation, basically design and doing it together, and then always coming back, whatever the time frame is, 2 weeks, 1 week, and saying, what do you think about this? Have a play with this, or what are your thoughts on that? And not just blindly going ahead in my own little world of excitement about how amazing I thought I was. So that's probably stayed with me for a long time.
And that sounds like that has continued through your career in terms of how you manage the relationships with your team, the board, third parties as well. It sounds like that was a big learning curve for you.
So it probably wasn't, from a monetary point of view, it wasn't a big thing, but it's what I'm built on, and I think about constantly all the time is, do we have the customer in mind? Do we know who they are? Is this going to add value? Otherwise, we're just building technology for technology's sake, and it's not actually shifting the dial or making anybody smile, really. So that was a learning lesson, and also I was so upset, for days and weeks afterwards, and really sort of embarrassed, and so it stayed with me for quite some time, for 30 years almost.
Well, look, it's been really great chatting to you. I've really enjoyed learning about your career and hearing about, your story. So thank you ever so much, Norma.